It's mid-April 2025 and we just had a little cold snap here where the temperature in Middle Tennessee dropped down to 32 or 31, which is around 0 Celsius. And that is not really unusual for here, but what was unusual is there was a lot of warm weather leading up to that, so most of the broadleaf evergreens in my collection had started to break bud. And in this video we're going to take a look and see which species were negatively impacted by that very brief one-day dip below freezing, or maybe right to freezing, and other species were not at all affected. So let's check and see who the winners and losers are. Starting with Magnolia virginiana, sweet bay magnolia. This tree had already started to put off some growth, and you can see here the tips of several leaves were pretty badly scorched on this, but overall I'm not really worried because it appears that the main leaders here are very well protected, and the main leader is the growing end of the branch, and that's where the new growth emanates from. And so as long as that's not damaged, I feel pretty optimistic for the coming growing season here. But definitely an unfortunate start for this particular tree. Maybe some of the other sweet bays in the collection were not affected. We'll check. The D.D. Blanchard magnolia had not started to break bud yet, so it's perfectly protected. Here's some new growth on the Little Gem cultivar of southern magnolia. This is Magnolia grandiflora. Just starting to put on new growth, so it was protected from the freeze. Although I will point out that the main growing tips were damaged by some earlier cold in the winter. So this tree is probably one of the least cold hardy cultivars of southern gem, or of southern magnolia. This is Little Gem, once again. Spelled G-E-M, as in like a gemstone, Little Gem, in case you're looking it up. So for cold hardiness, this one is probably better a little further south than Middle Tennessee. Picking something like D.D. Blanchard or Edith Bogue is a better choice. This is a wax myrtle. This particular one is Myrica heterophylla, and it looks like, if we can focus here, that there was indeed some damage to this new growth. But it's a pretty, I don't know if it's fast growing or not. This Myrica heterophylla seems to be a slower growing, lower growing version of the southern wax myrtle, which is in the same genus. That's Myrica cerifera. We'll check that in a minute. But it had branched, bloomed out pretty early, and broken bud. I don't know. Not too bad damage, but definitely some scorch there on the ends. We'll see if it can recover. Pretty interesting evergreen though. This leaf we're looking at here now, it made it all the way through the wintertime with some single digits in the Fahrenheit, which is -10 Celsius, so pretty resilient. This is the Nellie Stevens holly, which is a hybrid, of course, and looks like there's no damage there. Although if I look up here at this one where the new growth was coming out, you can see that black in the middle of the screen is new growth that was frozen by that little cold snap, so it will have to create some new buds and overcome that damage. And Nellie Stevens is not that cold hardy, and it does lose branches and foliage from the cold every now and then. So if you're looking for a rock solid hardy holly, Nellie Stevens is not it. We'll check some others later on that are going to show 0 damage. Here's Ilex pedunculosa, the long stalk holly, and you can see that the tips of that new growth were blackened by the cold. This is the Bigfoot Clara, Turnstroemia gymnanthera, and for the most part it had not really broken bud, so I think most of the new growth was protected. Although in the few areas where it had been further along, you can see that browning at the tip there on that one. So there was very minor damage. Here's some leaves further down that were a little bit further out, and you can see that they were indeed cold damaged. And Clara is kind of marginal in Middle Tennessee as far as hardiness goes, but it is worth pointing out that all of these dark green leaves you see here made it through single digits Fahrenheit, -10 Celsius. So I guess zone 7 is about right for it, but like with any plant that's marginal, it's going to be susceptible to those late season frosts. Here's Chinese holly, Ilex chinensis. Very minimal cold damage maybe on the very tips, but overall looking really good. And as I mentioned before, this is the other wax myrtle species, Myrica cerifera, commonly known as southern wax myrtle, and you can see it looks like there was some scorching on a few of the leaves of the new growth, but overall not that bad. And here we have the regular skip laurel or cherry laurel, those are just marketing names for the English laurel, Prunus lauriceracis, native to Europe, and it looks like none of this new growth was damaged. So pretty good, actually. I'm impressed. Here we have the wintergreen barberry. This is Berberis julianae, and the only thing I will point out is that before the cold snap, that new growth there on the tip was kind of a lime green, and now it's got a little bit of a bronze color. I think that's just a reaction to the cold, and it will continue growing. So maybe just a little damage at the very tip there. We'll see. This is a very small specimen, so I'm hopeful that it can put on some meaningful growth. This is another barberry, Berberis replicata, and once again the new growth, which was previously kind of greenish, has now turned reddish, and there was some damage at a few of the tips, but overall looking pretty good. I'm hopeful that this one will continue to grow during the summer. And this is Camellia japonica, the Korean fire cultivar of Camellia, and it looks like there was some damage on the new growth there. You can see that browning, but overall there still seem to be some new green shoots that will come out and keep growing. So Camellia did pretty good. This is going to be a full update, by the way, on all the broadleaf evergreens, so brace yourself for all kinds of hollies. This is the castle wall holly, and it had not even broken bud yet, so no real damage. Even the blooms were not out. Here you have the Prague viburnum, and it was putting on new growth, 0 damage. These blooms at the top, 0 damage. And down at the bottom of the tree, actually it's already in bloom, and there was no damage there. So the cold hardiness of Prague viburnum, once again, very cold hardy. Of all the viburnums, if you want to grow a viburnum, then Prague viburnum is going to be the most cold hardy in Middle Tennessee. And this is the firethorn, Latin name Pyracantha coccinea, showing 0 damage from the recent cold snap and starting to put out those new buds there that will form the flowers and later on those orange berries. So firethorn, very cold hardy. Lots of new growth here already by mid-April. This is Portuguese laurel, Prunus lusitanica, just starting to grow. Doesn't appear to have been majorly impacted by the cold. And here we have the Centennial Girl holly, which is a hybrid, and it seems there may be some slight damage on a few of the leaves. Further down on the Centennial Girl, it's already blooming. There's another Clayera here, Turnshoremia gymnanthera, and this is the Leanne cultivar, I believe. Minor damage because it was leafing out sooner, but you can see there's a lot of this new bronze-colored growth that wasn't damaged. And the main leader here at the top has not even really broken bud yet, so still doing pretty good with this Leanne cultivar of Clayera. Here we have Lonicera nitida, which is the common name boxleaf honeysuckle. 0 damage from the cold. And the silverthorn, Elaeagnus pungens, also 0 damage on lots of new silvery growth. It's very far along so far in putting out new growth. Relatively fast growing. And just to give you an overall look of what this Elaeagnus looks like, at this point it's kind of a large bush, but I'm hoping to train it into a small tree. This is the red bay tree, Persea bourbonia. It has some very fuzzy new growth, a little bit silvery in color, and I think those hairs helped it withstand the cold because I don't really see any damage on the new growth here. This is the China Boy holly, a hybrid between Ilex rugosa and Ilex cornuta, so 2 Asian species of holly. And it looks like some of the new growth was blackened by the cold, so we'll see if that affects the overall season growth for this particular holly. Plenty of damage on this holly, which is not totally unexpected. This is the Screenplay holly, a hybrid between Ilex latifolia and Ilex integra, and it's probably the least cold hardy holly in my entire collection, and it had gone ahead and put out lots of new growth, which seems to be really scorched. So it's going to probably have to mount a comeback and put on some mid-season or late-season growth. The lower growth down here under the bottom was a little more protected, and you might be thinking, hey, why didn't you put something over this holly to protect it from the cold? Well, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm testing to see how it's going to be when it's 10 feet tall and I can't put anything over it. So we'll see what happens. If it continues to grow and survive in spite of late freezes and cold spells, then I'll keep it in the collection. But if it just ultimately succumbs to the elements, then I will replace it with something more resilient. So it's very much like a survival of the fittest situation here in this evergreen collection. My ultimate goal is a low maintenance evergreen collection that doesn't involve me doing a lot of protection. Dragon Lady Holly here is in bloom, and not much in the way of new growth at the tip here, so it wasn't affected by the cold. This is the Oakland Holly, another less hardy hybrid of hollies. And you can see here it had already started putting out a lot of growth. Here's more of the Oakland Holly. Even at the tip here, it was trying to put on new growth for a new leader that has been scorched to black. So it will have to try again. And that's the way it goes with Oak Leaf Holly. You see these all over Home Depot, and looks good in theory, but when you try it, you find out that this sort of thing happens. Which is why we should take a look at this other holly, which is the opposite of that situation. The Foster Holly. In theory, this is one of the most cold hardy hollies, but I want to point out what's happening with the new growth here on this one. Even its new growth was a little bit scorched. So, probably with any holly, if new growth was exposed to freezing temperatures, it's not going to be cold-hardened, and it's going to take some damage. The question is which ones wait the longest to break bud, and means that they're less susceptible to this type of damage. Christmas Jewel Holly, same story as the others we just looked at. New growth had broken bud, and it was frozen by the brief dip below freezing. More of the same. This is the Inkberry Holly. Ilex glabra, new growth was out, and new growth was frozen. The new growth was not quite as far along on the Japanese Holly. This is Ilex crenata, but you can see what little growth was out was damaged by the cold. This is the Carolina Laurel, Prunus caroliniana. Has been in bloom for a while now, and it had also sprouted lots of new growth, which seems to be totally undamaged by the cold snap. Hold on, let's focus on this. Check out those nice new leaves there. Here's another little selection of new leaf growth right at the tips. Wow. Looking really good. It's quite a contrast with those hollies. So do not sleep on Carolina Laurel, Prunus caroliniana. Forms a small tree, has flowers, evergreen all winter. Definitely a good result here. That's really why I do these sorts of plantings and collections, to find out what the real deal is. If you look at like an online nursery or even an in-person nursery, they both say Zone 7 for hollies and Zone 7 for Carolina Laurel, but you can see the reality is a little bit different. I need to give an update on this large specimen of the Southern Wax Myrtle. Earlier we looked at a very tiny one that had been somewhat protected and saw that its new growth was a little bit scorched. This one was not really protected and was exposed to the single digits Fahrenheit, -teens Celsius all winter long. And you can see that for the third year in a row, if you're keeping track, the foliage has all turned brown and basically fallen off. And I'm waiting for it to resprout. If by some miracle it does not resprout, then that would represent a definitive answer about the cold hardiness of Southern Wax Myrtle in Middle Tennessee, and I will replace it with something else. Here we have Savannah Holly, which is a hybrid of Ilex cassine and Ilex opaca, two North American species native to the southeastern U.S. Well, of course, Ilex opaca goes up into the northeast. And you can see there was some minor scorching at the tips of the leaves, but overall the damage is not catastrophic like some of the other Asian hybrids we looked at a little bit earlier. Yeah, it's obviously some tip damage, but not the worst. And this is straight species Ilex opaca, American holly, and even though there was some tender new growth, it doesn't look like it was really damaged at all. And this probably is the most cold hardy holly in the entire collection, and it's living up to its reputation. This is gallberry holly, Ilex coriaceae. Luckily it had not really put on much new growth yet, and it looks like some of the tips were scorched, but I'm hopeful that it will still continue to put on good growth this year. This is Caspian holly, Ilex spinigera. It had not really started to grow that much. It had bloomed, and you can see it's actually already fruiting, so the blooms have been out for a while, but the new growth had not started yet, so no damage. Blue Prince holly, one of the blue hollies, which is a hybrid between Ilex aquifolium, which is English holly, and Ilex rugosa, a holly native to northeastern Asia. The new growth is now brown and crunchy, so it'll have to recover from that. There wasn't too much new growth, and I can already see some, well, that was just one lucky leaf there. We'll see what happens. Now this is pretty cool. This is the Yupon holly. Latin name is Ilex vomitoria, native to the southeastern US. And it looks like there was some bronzing on the leaves, but overall not a lot of damage, so somewhat encouraging on the Ilex vomitoria. There's a perfect example on that. Some tips were browned, but the growing leader appears to be undamaged, although somewhat reddened by the cold. Here we have Manhattan euonymus, Ilex chialchovicus. Had already leafed out a lot and appears to be completely unaffected by the little cold snap. Now here's something totally predictable. The Liberty holly, Ilex latifolia, it's a latifolia combined with some other things like Ilex perni and cornuta. So a bunch of Chinese hollies all hybridized together. This one regularly suffers cold damage during the winter, and the new growth is now black and crispy after a very brief dip below freezing. Here we have the Dahun holly, Ilex cassine. Was really not that far along in its growth, and it seems that that helped it avoid most of the damage. And here is the Scotch broom, Cytisus scoparia. Doesn't appear to have been affected at all. Very small leaves, as you can see, and lots of pink blooms on this particular specimen. Here we have Osmanthus heterophylla. This is the Sasaba cultivar, and even though some tender growth was out, it looks okay. So relatively good news for the Osmanthus heterophylla, also known as a false holly. Here we have coastal fetterbush, Agarista populifolia, native to the southeastern US. There was some new growth here lower down, not damaged. And the upper growth, I will point out, looks pristine. So something that grows in Florida and maybe southern Georgia, southern Alabama, moved to Middle Tennessee, subjected to single digits Fahrenheit, -10 Celsius, and not a single brown or yellowed leaf in a partial to mostly shady location. Definitely an underutilized evergreen. Here we have Daphnephyllum macropodum. Hasn't really even started to grow yet, but for that reason, not affected by the cold either. At the very beginning of this video, we looked at a sweet bay magnolia. Come on, we need to focus. There we go. And that was just a regular sweet bay. This one is the, I think it's Moonlight, maybe? Or Silver Mist. I think it's the Silver Mist cultivar. And it looks like maybe there was some damage, but not a lot. Let's look at some more new growth here. Yeah, maybe it was a little bit further behind, and therefore not that damaged. So still going strong on the Silver Mist cultivar of Magnolia virginiana. And notice it does have these a little bit more elongated leaves, which survived the previously mentioned cold temperatures. And it's technically a semi-evergreen tree, so it loses some to most leaves at the very northern edge of its territory. But you can see for this particular one here in Middle Tennessee, it's got a lot of leaf retention. Wheel tree, Trocodendron aurelioides, had already put out lots of new growth by the time the cold hit, and none of it appears to be damaged. This is another tree related to the feather bush that I showed you earlier. This is the Leucothoi axillaris coastal dog hobble, and you can see the foliage looks amazing, and it's already got these little urn-shaped white flowers, which is a clue that it's a member of the blueberry family. Forms a low bush and very cold hardy. As you can see, it had not really started to put on new growth, which maybe is why it is so cold hardy. Florida anise. Check out that flower. Very tropical looking, and the foliage matches it as well. Extremely cold hardy tree, 0 cold damage, and I guess part of the strategy has been revealed because there is practically no new growth as far as leaves go. It looks like the buds are just breaking, so it missed the cold, and who really cares if the flowers get frozen? Certainly I don't, but in this case they weren't even frozen, so even the flowers are cold hardy on this species here. Can't say enough positive things about Elysium, and I've said it in 100 videos, I'll say it again. If you're not growing Elysium in Middle Tennessee and you're trying to grow broadleaf evergreens, you missed something important. Different species of Elysium here. This is Elysium parviflorum, the Ocala anise. Just starting to break bud. These buds were out for the cold. 0 damage, as expected. What a champion tree. A common name for this is Andromeda, or maybe Japanese Andromeda. It is the Pieris, Latin name Pieris japonica. Lots of different cultivars out there. This one is the Dorothy Wyckoff, and you can see there was new foliage out, totally undamaged. Further down on this little bush here, a lot of new foliage, 0 damage. Mostly shade location, in case you're wondering. And once again, urn-shaped flowers. That's right, the blueberry family, related to the others we looked at earlier. And here we have the Middle Tennessee native, except this one is a cultivar called Minuet, Latin name Kalmia latifolia, mountain laurel, and really no new growth yet, just getting started. No damage either. Well, let's see, further down it might bloom before it puts out new growth. Well, there's a little new growth, we'll see. Kind of doing okay in my collection, but definitely surviving. Skimmia japonica, the new growth was out, but the new growth was not damaged. And a third Elysium species, this one is Elysium henryi, not blooming or really putting on new growth either, which is just fine, so it avoided the cold. Common name is devilwood tree. It is Cartrema americana, and it did have new growth out for the cold snap, and none of it was damaged. Very encouraging result here. Another one of those feather bush species. This one is Leucothoi fontanesiana. Looks like it had just started to grow. Not enough to be damaged by the cold. Fairly cold hardy. This is a partially shady location. And another one in that blueberry family. And in case you're wondering what family I keep referencing, it is the Ericaceae family, which I'm trying to emphasize in my collection because some of the online research indicated that plants in the Ericaceae are more resistant to armillaria root rot. So I'm going to try to grow more of things in this family. Rhododendron maximum here, just a regular rhododendron, just starting to bloom, and there was no real new foliage growth, so it wasn't really damaged by the cold.